the act of the primary function for Confederacy is the act of slavery, incarceration, terrorism, abuse, and the fundamental precepts psychologically is a burden to the human soul, at which point the inevitability in the numbers turn out consistently to report that those who support the functionality intentionally or unintentionally towards the mechanism of the abuse society systematically turn into abuse, even if it would have otherwise been an equitable engagement, similar to the function of D&D's alignment planes, at which point if you're in a particular alignment plane, you become infused with the plane's type, whether it's lawful good, chaotic evil, anywhere in between. The activity of dwelling in the thing, of stewing in the substance of the standard moral concept, infests the soul, at which point many guards and policemen become overburdened and broken in spirit. They don't have to be in danger, they just have to be intoxicated, infused with the act of that system, constantly drilling into their soul, at which point they become defeated, dejected, drunkards, abusers. The statistic on police abusers who turn out to hit their wives is based upon this concept. They're put in the scenario where they are psychologically traumatized into it, and then they take it home. At which point, that's when they get silent, that's when they get abusive. It's the status quo concept concerning the returning soldier. The returning soldier who comes back and is broken by the war, and no matter what the significant others or family members and friends, which otherwise would have been able to convince them to do and be anything they needed to be, become entirely incapable of helping them under the concept that they have subjugated themselves to the attunement of that trauma. Having systematically infused their soul, they have been corrupted by the mechanism the machine has brought from them. And it might be perfectly necessary, or it might not be perfectly necessary, but the fact that it affects you is undeniable. It is scientifically researchable. It is provable reality. The maintenance of the system of Confederacy, of those who believe that some people are born to be masters and some people are born to be slaves, inherently infuse the obligation that this must therefore exist, that these mechanisms of abuse are a compulsion, guaranteeing the condemnation of larger portions of society into those actions. Slavery hurts the slave and it hurts the slave owner, at which point that trauma, systematically engaging into itself, becomes the status quo subject, makes the general public who have been subject and infused and accepting and ingesting of it abusers. And that action of the mechanism of becoming numb to it, of increasing into the fetish of abuse, compels them to relieve themselves through the abuse, which again leads to the concept of them hitting their wives or looking to the black markets in order to take the edge off with whatever criminal product it might be, whether it's using your secrecy in order to hurt a particular class, redirect certain resources in order to acquire certain advantages, see if you can vacation your way into psychological health, whether or not it's narcotics, whether or not it's child abuse, whether or not it's pulling someone randomly off the street in order to assert your dominance. It could be anything. Your arbitrary hatred of a group. Racism is very, very easy for them because the concept that they need something to express that aggression, to relieve themselves of that infused reality, becomes the status quo compulsion. It is traumatizing to all parties, and it is their status quo. It is their normalized position in their racist system, in the insurrection against these United States. Now, the acknowledgement that the Confederates believe that the concept that some people are born unequal, some people are born masters and some people are born slaves, assumes to themselves the reality that those who acquire debt into traumatizing themselves into being unequitable to the general society in an equal, fair, legitimate, competent society, the law would be valid. Now, if the law is valid, which it isn't for the Confederacy, because their function is inherently terrorism, is inherently criminal, is inherently corrupted towards the crime market, and as they dabble more and more into the crime market, such as has actively been seen, such as with the drug market in Baltimore or California, in the Southern California at the border, or all of the examples that are excessive in every variation, in every kind of thing, the acts functionally corrupt them into the normalization of the engagement of the crime, and their acts of protecting each other from prosecution of those crimes is the acknowledgement that they have collectively renounced law, and that engagement of renouncing law amasses social debts, and these amassing of social debts become tentatively too expensive, which is why they need to protect each other from the application of those social liabilities. The protection of each other of those social liabilities is the acknowledged position that they were born to be slaves and cannot sustain their society or personal normalization into these cultures, making them unequitable and in debt, making them born to be slaves. At which point, the activity of the Confederates, who claim their superiority for their racism, have acknowledged in this other aspect that they are the slaves in question, they are the inferior in question, and having certified themselves dejected, outcast, born to be slaves, they have the inherent reaction and compulsion in retaliation against their inferiority, which they inherently understand, which is a natural expression of their culture and society and what it breeds. The qualifying aspect that they are the slaves in question, they are the inferiors in question, they are those who must be broken, dominated, and subjugated in question, is a natural expression of their existence in base reality according to the policies of their society. Now, we really have to start getting into the position where we can start relieving ourselves from the Confederate infection, at which point we have to start peeling away their criminal protections and subversions of the rule of law in their war against the rule of law, in their war against the American Republic, where they are subject to the civilians' popular will, at which points the popular government asserted by the civilians, being their enemy in war, is the consistent traumatized mechanism of every single systematic offense protecting itself. And we need to peel away every one of these false protections, every one of their criminal immunities, every one of their unitary executive theory bullshit nonsense. We have to systematically take away every assertion of their independent actions as a person, individually, separate from the function of the office they're pretending to hold, and separate them entirely, because when they act as an individual person, they are not acting as a government agent, and therefore when they refuse to act as a government agent and subjugate themselves to the rule of law at the service of law, they are no longer doing the function that they have been hired to do, and they present to the court, which has actively protected them against the action of separating themselves from their office as they act as an individual in these activities. We have to remove these protections. We have to systematically peel away layer by layer by layer by layer by layer of each of the corruptions and frauds and subversions to compel them to the service of law. And at that point, we have to understand that these broken, poor, horrified souls need help. They need to go get psychological, spiritual help. They need to fully be able to remove themselves from their toxic environment, which we must save them from. We must beat them, and we must save them from themselves and their corrupt societies. At which point, they can eventually become stable, competent people, and they have to choose it on purpose. Psychologists can only point the direction. They can only say, take this road. They can only give them a map and say, this is how you get there. They still have to walk it through themselves. No one can take them where, no one can drive them there. They have to psychologically walk through it themselves. They have to figure out where they are in their brain in order to have them helped to walk themselves out. And that's the only thing that can happen, at which point eventually they might become competent members of society, but it still requires their efforts. No one else can do it for them. Regardless of what the rest of society wants, needs, feels, is compelled to, separated from, politically diverse, socially diverse, it doesn't matter what the thing is. The obligation is we must compel all of them into surrendering to the rule of law, to accept all liabilities for all actions, for the full separation and competent enforcement of the restructuring of the Republic against the war damages which have been taking place in the war on David's espionage insurrection. Their declaration of war against David Bowles as the leader of the United States, in their opinion, is an attack on the Republic, at which point we need to fully restrain them from those positions. We must regress all of their advantages. We must force them to pay all of their liabilities. We have to engage in the systematic restructuring of the Republic under the public will, and we must save America.